Hello there, good evening. Welcome to Look North, our top story tonight. More speed cameras are on the way in West Yorkshire in a bid to make our roads safer.
We are asking, pleading, begging drivers to think about safety whenever they get in their cars. Do not take it for granted that there's not a speed camera around that corner.
Communities will have more say and warning signs will no longer be mandatory. Also tonight, the parents struggling to get support for their children amid a shortage of places at special educational schools in Yorkshire. And BBC research finds shrinking bus routes in our region, with North Yorkshire worse hit. Red sky at night, photographer's delight. We've got a stunning selection of your snaps of last night's sunset.
Staying very mild in the short term, but a change coming later in the week. Join me for the detailed forecast.
Thanks for your company this Monday evening. Police are warning drivers in West Yorkshire to expect the unexpected as they change the way speed cameras are deployed in the region. Last year, 65 people were killed on West Yorkshire's roads. 5,000 people were injured. Now, police say most of these collisions were avoidable, with excessive speed often to blame. The force is now to make changes to how speed cameras are used. In future, they won't necessarily be signs warning that you are approaching a speed camera. Cameras may also be introduced because of community concerns. Now, in the past, stretches of road must have had a history of fatal or serious injury collisions before cameras were installed. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, Emma Glasby.
They're often a source of debate. Many campaigners argue they save lives, but some drivers don't like them. Speed cameras have traditionally been put on roads where people have been killed or seriously injured. But now West Yorkshire Police say they may also be installed in areas of community concern. And there won't always be signs to warn drivers a camera is there. It's a new and fairly unique approach for the UK.
Most local authorities have relied on speed cameras being signposted well in advance. We're no longer doing that. We're not going to remove the existing signage because that would be a waste, but we are now committed to putting the safety of our communities first. So we want people to be conscious that there might be a camera wherever they're travelling. Those people who think that they have got rights that are bigger than the rights of their communities, maybe they won't be happy. Tough.
The fact is, speed kills. 12-year-old Alice Greenwood from Pontefract was in a car with her mum and younger sister when they were hit by a speeding driver. Alice died at the scene. Now her father campaigns against speeding.
I do this because I don't want it to happen to anybody else. I can't bring Alice back. She's gone forever. But if I can just persuade one of you out there just to kind of go a bit more slowly and to obey the law and just to think about the consequences of something that is just stupid, then I'm pleased that you've listened, and I'm pleased that you've changed your behaviour. And if that stops somebody else having to deal with what I've had to deal with, that's a good thing.
Here, they also want some drivers to change their behaviour. On the Meanwood Road in Leeds, they set up a bird box designed to look like a speed camera. The locals are trying to make people aware this is a place where families live, but they say some drivers still go too fast on this road.
It's long, it's straight and it's wide, and so I think it invites people to travel maybe a little quicker than they should. Not everyone, of course, but some people do, and particularly I think at night.
So you think a real speed camera could be beneficial here?
Yeah, it would help. Let's be proactive with the speeding rather than wait for one of my neighbours or my kids to get knocked over. Let's do something which maybe highlights that is an issue.
These changes will mean more drivers being caught speeding in West Yorkshire. But police say dramatic action is needed to prevent more people being killed. Emma Glasby, BBC Look North.
Let's hear now from Edmund King. He's president of the drivers' body, the AA. He told me this approach is unusual.
What West Yorkshire Police are trying to do is to try and stop some of that so-called surfing. So this is drivers that may speed. When they see a sign, they slow down, then they speed up again. And I think the reality is, if we look across West Yorkshire, 60 people killed on the roads last year, many more injured. It's difficult to argue against cameras if they do actually slow drivers down.
How unique is this approach for West Yorkshire? Community involvement and also the fact there's no signs on those speed cameras.
So this is a different approach. It's quite unique talking to the communities because normally cameras are located in areas that have the most crashes, but no one wants speeding through their own particular community. And obviously West Yorkshire Police resources are finite. They can't have cameras everywhere. So we would say they should be targeted at the most dangerous road.
The fact that there aren't any more signs in place, that's often a reminder, isn't it, for motorists to check their speed. Is this designed to catch people out?
The aim should actually not be to give out lots of tickets. It should be to make the roads safer. Drivers in most modern cars, you can set a speed limiter. Many sat-navs in cars actually warn you if you're going against the speed limit. So, really, in effect, there is no excuse for breaking the speed limit. So I think the advice for drivers is just to be extra vigilant and use your sat-nav to abide by the speed limits to avoid getting points.
That was Edmund King from the AA speaking to me earlier. We're going to move on to a different subject now. BBC research has found that half of the schools for children with special educational needs and disabilities in Yorkshire are oversubscribed. That means there aren't enough places for every child that needs one, leaving some children at schools that are just unsuitable. Others are missing out on education entirely. Elaine Dunkley has spent the day at a school in Maltby in Rotherham to see how they're coping.
He's made out to be a monster and all these things, and that's not the case. He's just a little boy with additional needs that needs help and support. It's that simple.
These parents are all battling to get the right school for their children with special educational needs and disabilities.
It's like hitting your head against a brick wall.
Children who are struggling in mainstream schools.
You eat, sleep, breathe, live special needs.
And this is why parents are desperate. This is Maltby Hilltop School in Rotherham. It's full and there are long waiting lists.
How much of your time do you spend looking for space?
I mean, it's continual.
10 years ago, they had 82 pupils. Now they have 134 and there is a waiting list.
What I'm about to show you, this was a former resource cupboard, but now we have members of the visual impairment therapy team conducting therapy with our children in this space.
In a resource cupboard?
In a resource cupboard. Afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm ashamed. As the head teacher of this school, I genuinely do feel it's shameful that this is what we are providing for our children. They deserve so much better.
We are clicking castanets.
So what is causing pressure on places? There is increasing diagnosis of special educational needs. Some mainstream schools are struggling to cope.
We're going to watch that tennis game.
Funding is an issue. Local authorities' high-need budgets are tight. And new specialist schools aren't being built quick enough to cope with the rising demand for places. 5-year-old Georgie is on a waiting list to come to this school.
By the time she'll be coming here in September next year, that'll be 2 years out of education. So to see her today with the other children, it chokes you up.
And whilst there are children waiting for a place, there are others leaving due to overcrowding. Sarah's in school to collect her son Cohen's belongings.
I've just seen his tray. This is his tray. It's really sad to see it because this is where he should be. And he should be learning and he should be with his friends. He started to have panic attacks, hyperventilating. He wants to be here, but the space is not allowing it.
The government says it's providing £2.6 billion in funding between now and 2025 to help deliver new places for children with special educational needs and disabilities.
Is there enough recognition of what happens in schools like yours?
No, because we shut up and get on with it. But there comes a breaking point, and we are at utter capacity.
Elaine Dunkley, BBC Look North in Rotherham.
Warren Karat is from the Academy Trust, which runs Maltby Hilltop and the 12 other SEND schools. I asked him why demand for places is increasing so much like we've just seen.
We've seen a significant increase in children being issued with education, health and care plans after the changes to the law in 2014. But what we've not seen at the same time is a strategy from government to invest in infrastructure and capital build to be able to ensure there's provision in place to meet that increase in demand. So we've reached a point now where the sector is saturated and there isn't the space or capacity to be able to meet the demand anymore.
The government says it's investing up to £2.6 billion to 2025 to give more places. Are you saying it's needed right now?
Absolutely, and we really welcome the news that the government are investing more in high needs funding. Unfortunately, that doesn't do enough to make up for the years of disinvestment between 2010 and probably 3 years ago. And that's the crux of the issue, is we've had an underinvestment in SEND for the best part of a decade. New investment's great, but we need more to make up for lost time.
School budgets are tight. Is there a case that more children are being sent to specialist schools like yours because they don't have the time or the resources to deal with them in a mainstream capacity?
No, I don't believe that is the case. Local authorities ultimately take the decision on whether or not to place a child in a special school. So special schools don't control their own admissions. And in my experience, children who shouldn't be in special aren't in special. It's quite the opposite. We've got a lot of complex learners who should be in specialist provision, who aren't able to access a place up and down the country because there's an insufficient supply. Some areas, it's not as bad as others, but in other areas, it's incredibly chronic.
We can see parents at the end of their tether. What impact does this have on families?
I think for most families, they go through such an arduous ordeal to get to the point where their child is issued with an EHCP and it's determined that they are eligible for a specialist place. And for that to not be available, I don't know where you go with that.
Warren Karatz, thank you for your time. And there's lots more on this story in a new documentary. It's called Send Help, available on the BBC iPlayer right now. Let's have a look at some of the stories coming into our newsroom now. A murder investigation has been launched following the death of a 17-year-old boy in Huddersfield. Police were called to Kingsmill Lane just before 4 this morning to a teenager with knife wounds. He was taken to hospital for emergency treatment, but sadly died later this morning. 2 men are in custody. Police are appealing for witnesses or footage that may help with their inquiries. The body of a woman has been found in Sheffield. Officers entered a property in the Skelton Close area just after 8 this morning. A formal identification has yet to take place, but the death has been treated as suspicious. South Yorkshire Police are urging anyone who has seen or heard anything unusual over the last few weeks to come forward. Ambulance workers in our region only responded to life-threatening or emergency calls today as part of the latest wave of strikes. The action is by paramedics and call handlers from the Yorkshire and East Midlands ambulance services. It's part of an ongoing dispute over pay. The government says higher pay rises are unaffordable. The Army was on standby to reduce the pressure. A Sheffield TV presenter says he's glad to be alive after being involved in a collision with a car while riding his bike. Former BBC Breakfast host Dan Walker posted a picture from inside a Yorkshire ambulance on Twitter this morning and thanked police and paramedics. He said he doesn't think anything is broken and was thankful for the NHS. Now, there's just a week to go until Sheffield's Clean Air Zone is introduced, and this will mean that drivers of more highly polluting vehicles will be charged £10 a day to enter the city centre. Some businesses have been critical, but today the council has defended the scheme. Phil Bodmer is in Sheffield for us this evening. Phil, what the council had to say on this?
Well, as you say, Amy, this time next week, Sheffield, in keeping with Bradford, will have its own clean air zone. Basically, that means any street within the inner ring road area, which is pretty much most of the city centre, will come under the clean air zone. But this, as you may imagine, has been hugely controversial because many businesses, including some of those just, 10, 15 minutes up the road in North Derbyshire, say they don't get any help at all. And even the man charged with implementing the scheme acknowledges there has been some teething difficulties with it and says that really it's been driven by central government, and the funding for private enterprise, if you like, to upgrade their fleets and improve their vehicles, well, that's really not as much as they would have liked.
We've been instructed by government that there's a difference there. You'd have thought government would have sat down with us, with the other local authorities, had a conversation, but the government were taken to court by Client Earth 3 times. The highest court in the land said you need to do something really, really quickly. So They came out with a policy on the hoof, and like other councils, we were given an option, and the option we've taken ensures that private cars, for example, and motorbikes are exempt.
We spoke to one business who operates out of Derbyshire. They can't get any help at all, yet somebody further away in Rotherham can. That surely can't be right, can it?
So both Sheffield and Rotherham have been instructed to bring in the clean air zone. Plus, we've had to draw a boundary, so this is for businesses based in Sheffield.
They've just taken national money and ring-fenced it for Sheffield and not allowed it to be used for people close by.
So what do you say to that farmer in Derbyshire who says, look, I'm being penalised and I'm 15 minutes out of a city centre?
For me, I'm going to take that up with government, because it's very important to highlight these individual cases that have an impact.
We had one viewer get in touch who says his 60-plate van is going to be subject to the £10 charge, but somebody with a private SUV is exempt. That doesn't seem fair, does it?
The aim for me has always been, how do we take these polluting vehicles off our streets? The only way you can do that is by providing the right financial support to folks to make that transition, and we're just not in a position to do that at this moment in time.
Given that some people have said, look, they're finding it hard to get onto the system, they're finding it hard to get that support, would you acknowledge there have been issues with that?
We've increased the capacity of our workforce to deal with a large number of queries. So, again, apologies for people who've struggled to get on there, but from what I'm told, the email is working, the website is working, and there's a contact number on there. Please get in touch, and we're here to help.
So from next Monday, Amy, those most polluting taxis, HGVs and buses will face a charge of between £10 and £50 a day to enter the clean air zone. The advice from the authorities is, if you're still unsure about the impact on your business, then please access the council website. They say it is working, but please make sure you're prepared for the implementation, which, as you know, begins in 7 days' time. Amy.
Yep, a reminder there. Thanks, Phil. 1 week's time, Sheffield's Clean Air Zone begins. We are all being encouraged, aren't we, more and more to use public transport, but it's harder than it sounds for many people. Bus networks are shrinking, with BBC analysis suggesting that in some parts of Yorkshire, services are being cut by more than a third. Buses now travel 17 million fewer miles per year in the region than 5 years ago, with North Yorkshire worst hit. Here's Carla Fowler.
The most scenic bus route in the country faces the cut. The 840 Coastliner service from Leeds is under review. Without funding, it's feared the Malton to Whitby section of the journey may be scrapped, leaving towns like Pickering, Thornton-le-Dale and Whitby without a service. In Pickering, locals have started a petition to save the 840.
Just unthinkable, you know, for a town like Pickering, with the tourism and the locals that live here and need that bus. We just thought, well, definitely we've got to do something about this. We're fed up of being told we can't have this, that's being cut, we're taking this away from you, etc. It's just one more thing that's, you know, a nail in the coffin.
Transdev, who operate the service, have said they're responding to challenges of declining government funding as well as customer numbers. The 840 is just one route currently under threat. Rising fuel costs and inflation are all contributing to financial pressures on service providers. According to North Yorkshire County Council, 80 bus routes in the county are no longer profitable and therefore could be at risk of closure. In the 5 years to 2022, bus provision has decreased across Yorkshire and Humberside. In West Yorkshire, the number of bus miles provided fell by 13%. In South Yorkshire, the drop was 14%, similar to the national average. But here in North Yorkshire, more than 3 million bus miles have been cut in 5 years, a reduction of nearly 30%. The Department for Transport say they've invested £2 billion into maintaining bus routes since the pandemic and are putting a further £1 billion into services in England. They say they're working closely with the sector to best support operators in challenging conditions.
So overall, we've reduced our operated mileage by about 15% over the last 3 years as we reflect the general decrease in number of people travelling. Now, we've had to do that in order to keep services sustainable. Some services are still running at the same frequency and others have had a bigger reduction, such as this one we're on now, where it's been a near 50% reduction.
It's little villages like Ruston that end up losing out.
I think for a lot of people that don't go out as often, it's difficult to get to the doctors, it's difficult to see family. I think they need to look at the route, and I think they need to make some stops in Ruston and some stops in the villages, because it's not fair on the residents and it's having a huge impact on their lives.
Back in Pickering, locals are now worrying what the loss of the 8:40 service could mean for them. Courtney works in a nursery in Malton.
It mean I'd have to quit my job because I don't drive, so I've no other transport.
The views might be magnificent, but the future looks bleak for rural bus routes. Carla Fowler, BBC Look North.
In the Championship, it was a dream start for returning Huddersfield Town boss Neil Warnock, although it did get off to a less than perfect start when Birmingham went 1-0 up after just 6 minutes. But Huddersfield responded with 2 goals, including this one from Joseph Hungbo, giving an emotional Warnock the result he wanted, 2-1, and the Terriers' first league success in 8 games.
Every one of them fans have gone home happy tonight, and you know, every one of them players now believes. And it's a big thing. That's why I'm in the game. That's why I came back. I owed Huddersfield something, because it's not all young uns, you know. Yeah, young uns are good, but experience does count for a bit.
Meanwhile, Sheffield United were 2-1 down at Millwall until this goal from James McAtee evened the score. But with just 2 minutes remaining of the match, Tom Bradshaw scored his 3rd goal, that hat-trick giving Millwall a 3-2 win. The Blades remained second in the table, though feeling a little less comfortable. More comfort, though, for Sheffield Wednesday. They came from behind twice to thrash struggling MK Dons 5-2 at Hillsborough. That win takes them back to the top of League One. And there was another big scoring match for Barnsley away at Cheltenham, where the goals just kept on coming. Final scores: Cheltenham 0, Barnsley 4. Now, England's women's hopes of retaining the Arnold Clark Cup were helped yesterday by Rachel Daly. She was in superb form against Italy. Daly, who's from Harrogate, scored 2 headers to take England to a 2-1 win. The Lionesses now have 2 wins out of 2 and are in a really good position to retain the cup ahead of the deciding match against Belgium on Wednesday.
I'll tell you what, say it's February, it's been pretty warm today, hasn't it? Didn't need a coat at all. And you've been sending us lots of gorgeous photos of last night's amazing sunset. Let's enjoy a few, shall we? Oh, wow, some gorgeous pictures there. Paul, really mild, and I know you're going to tell us, because you've always got an eye on the gas meter.
Everybody has at the moment.
Yep.
Really, really good news. I mean, it's going to be exceptionally mild again tomorrow, but as we discussed on Look North a couple of months back, across the whole of Europe it's been an exceptionally mild winter, and at last this is going to feed through to the prices we pay for gas and electricity. Cornwall Insight, which are a consultancy group which looks at wholesale gas prices, have predicted that at last from July to December, the second half of this year, the prices that we pay for gas and electricity will fall by 14%, and actually gas prices will fall by nearly 20%, and that is a direct consequence of how mild it's been. But it's also been a windy winter, so the wind turbines have been working really hard, and it's meant that gas-fired power stations have not been used as much, so that's good news, isn't it?
It is good news. You can buy a new tie.
Thank you very much. Let me show you a couple of pictures then that you've sent in. Look at that. That's a picture of spring in Rotherham there, isn't it? The daffodils out in full bloom. And the second picture, we haven't got a second picture, but the addresses are on your screen, and if you send them in, I'll try and get them on the telly tomorrow. So the headline is an exceptionally mild one. Mind you, I've been filming in Ilkley today. It's been windy and it hasn't felt mild at all, but certainly further east there's been some sunshine, and that's lifted temperatures into double figures. For tomorrow then, it looks mostly dry, rather cloudy, the best of any sunshine across eastern areas. Changes are afoot. This cold front will bring a little patchy rain on Wednesday. It will introduce colder weather Thursday, Friday into the weekend. I say colder, but all that's going to happen is temperatures will revert to near normal levels, which is around 7 or 8 degrees. Now there's a satellite picture. You can see there's been some lovely spells of sunshine across eastern areas towards the coast, but it's been a very different story across the Pennines. Here, there'll continue to be a risk of a little drizzle over the tops of the hills, but elsewhere, dry, variable cloud and a very mild night to come, temperatures coming in at 8 or 9 degrees. So tomorrow's high water times then at Scarborough at 4:50 and again at 4:57. So a fine start. There'll be some sunshine around, I think, first thing in the morning away from the Pennines, but the cloud across the Pennines will gradually filter eastwards. So if you've got some sunshine in the morning, it's likely to give way to mostly cloudy skies. A little drizzle over the tops of the Pennines. Otherwise, it looks set to be dry and in the brighter spots. Look at that in York, in Doncaster, 13 Celsius, 55 Fahrenheit. A little rain for time on Wednesday. It looks colder, but sunny on Thursday. That's the forecast.
Do you know what day it is tomorrow?
Pancake Tuesday.
It is. It's Shrove Tuesday. And if, like in our house, it's a full event in your household, pancakes are consumed at every meal, we want to see your pictures. The flipping, the fabulous toppings. Send your pictures well in advance of tomorrow night's programme and we'll show them on air. look.north@bbc.co.uk is the email. We can't wait to see them. I'll make myself hungry talking about it. That's it from us. Bye-bye.